Good morning and welcome to the Oval. It's wonderful to be here. And welcome to our State of Ageing Research Forum, part of the Healthy Ageing Challenge and Healthy Ageing 2023. I'm Judith Phillips. I'm the Research Director for the Healthy Ageing Challenge. And it's my pleasure today to be chairing this morning's session. Before we get going, there's the obvious housekeeping, and this is where I go into air hostess mode. So fire exits are signed. The assembly area is the pavilion stand forecourt, and there are no test alarms today. On your badges, you will see at the back, you'll find details of Slido, which is where you will need to put your questions for our Q&A session. And you'll see the social media details there as well. And for those of you online, welcome. And the Slido details will appear at the side of the screen. It's great to see so many people here in person today. It's such a big venue, but it's great to see so many familiar faces and new faces as well. So a real big welcome. And welcome to those online. Now, they can't see the audience, and we can't see the online people. So what I'm going to say is let's say a big hello from us to the online people so they feel included. Hello. Hello. Great. Thank you. So I hope you're going to have a really enjoyable day today, productive and a great opportunity for networking. So please try and meet 3 people you've never spoken to ever before and get to know them, because it's great territory to collaborate, actually, and particularly at the Oval, of course. The aim of today is to map the landscape of ageing research, including previous UKRI-funded streams and programmes, to assess the quality, reach and impact of our work, particularly through the REF 2021, and to look at key themes, priorities and gaps that have been in the last 10 years, with the aim of looking forward in what do we take forward in the future of ageing research. And we'll also hear from the Social Behavioural and Design Research Programme, which is part of the Healthy Ageing Challenge, which is a current programme that concludes March next year. We will hopefully have some time for questions at the end of this morning, but if you have any questions about the future, do hold them for this afternoon session, where we will be going into a question time approach. So the afternoon session will be chaired by Professor Alison Park from the ESRC, and it'll run along, well, you'll know what question time is like. She'll be the Fiona Bruce of the afternoon. And throughout the day, we want you to give us questions, so put them in Slido as you think of them this morning, and we will then have a look at them over lunch and make sure that we've got some questions ready to go for the afternoon. And then following the afternoon break, we then go into something called the Big Conversation. And that would be looking at the future of ageing and where research actually plays, of course, a very key part. So as the day moves on, it becomes much more interactive. A few questions this morning after our panelists, and then a question time this afternoon, followed by a facilitated interactive workshop by my colleagues from the Healthy Ageing Challenge team. So, to this morning. I can't think of a better time, really, than for us to take stock of where we're at. Several reports from the last few years have really highlighted the situation of older people and the need for a better evidence base. So we've had the Nuffield Council on Bioethics, several REF reports, and of course last week, the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty's report, Health in an Ageing Society. And all have recommendations for research. Throughout these reports, of course, there are calls for reframing aging from one of challenge to one of opportunity, opportunity offered by a healthier, longer life, but also the need to address inequalities, particularly resulting from cumulative disadvantage across the life course, and the importance of social science as a critical element in working with other areas to really address inequality. The Chris Whitty report, and we'll be looking forward to hearing Chris tomorrow, I hope, talks about being much more inclusive of older people in research. And older people should be the main focus of our research going forward. And I think you'll see from the Healthy Aging Challenge, we've put older people really at the centre of our endeavours. So without further introduction from me, let me introduce you to this morning's speakers. The full bios of our speakers are actually online, so this is a very abbreviated introduction. We're going to start with Professor Alan Walker, who will be talking about key milestones and developments in ageing and gerontological research. Alan is Professor of Social Policy and Social Gerontology at the University of Sheffield and co-director of the Healthy Lifespan Institute at Sheffield. He has directed several major European projects, including MOPACT and InnovAge, and the UK's largest research programme on ageing, the New Dynamics of Ageing programme, alongside the Growing Older programme and the European Research Area in Ageing and Future Age. I can't think of anyone better to talk about where we've actually come from. Our second presentation will be by Christina Rosenberg, and she will speak on an analysis of the state of UK ageing and gerontology research using REF data. And this will be looking at volume, quality, collaboration, interdisciplinarity, and knowledge uptake beyond academia. Christina is a managing partner at Technopolis UK, an economist by training. She has more than 15 years' experience in socio-economic impact assessments and evaluation in the areas of economic development and research and innovation policy and the creative industries. Following Christina, we are going to still keep on the REF theme, and Carol Holland will be speaking about the impact of ageing research through case studies from the REF. Carol is Professor in Ageing within the Division of Health Research at Lancaster University, and also Director of the Centre of Ageing Research. She's currently the President of the British Society of Gerontology. She's a psychologist by background and focuses on applied impacts of cognitive and health psychology of ageing and models of frailty. And then, penultimately, Janet Lord will be speaking about the wider landscape of ageing research, biomedical and geroscience approaches. And Janet will be talking about her experience as being part of the review of the recommendations from the 2021 House of Lords Inquiry, Ageing Science, Technology and Healthy Living. Janet is Professor of Immune Cell Biology at the Institute of Inflammation and Ageing at Birmingham University. She's been advisor to a number of committees and also contributed to Chris Whitty's latest report of the nation's health. I will then follow with a presentation on the Healthy Aging Challenge and our social behavioural and design research programme, so you can see what we've been up to over the last 4 years. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Alan to the podium to talk about the key milestones and developments in ageing research. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Judith, and good morning, everyone. I'm in control, am I? Great. Yes. Okay, so I responded to Judith's request to look at milestones in aging research, first of all, by looking at the development of aging research over the last 4 decades. So if we go back to the 1980s, and I start there, not just because of my age, but because the UK's first Institute of Gerontology was established as recently as the 1980s, and that's at least 2, probably 3 decades behind the development of aging research institutes in the USA. So these were the early stages of the development of aging research, and as you can see, only the ESRC had something, we wouldn't call it a program of aging research now because they've been developed, but it was called a program. It was a loose federation of aging research projects. And in the early 1990s, it was only the ESRC and the MRC that funded aging research in this country, right back to the early 1990s. But then following a governmental intervention, namely the Equal program, which was handed down by the DTI to the research councils, there was a rapid expansion of activity by all of the research councils, as you can see here, apart from AHRC. And the next decade saw the burgeoning of multidisciplinary research initiatives, perhaps best exemplified by the New Dynamics of Aging program, but that's a personal view, that as you can see, there were really a whole series of initiatives developed by the UK research councils focusing on aging in particular, and that list is without end. Simply at the bottom, the latest developments, and one expects that there will be further developments as time goes on. So aging research in substantial form, certainly in terms of funding and all of the activity that funding generated, came alive, really, during the late 1990s and the early 2000s. And if we look for a reason why the research councils gave encouragement to multidisciplinarity, it wasn't just the top-down injunction from the DTI. There was a genuine sense among the research councils, and I know that firsthand, because I shared discussions, many discussions, with all research council colleagues about the importance of multi and interdisciplinarity. I think it was really well put by Karl Popper a long while ago. We're not students of some subject matter, but students of problems. And problems may cut across the borders of any subject or discipline. And that is, I think, the case in general. Doesn't mean to say that monodisciplinary research is not crucial, but I think this is the case in general. But in aging research in particular, it is the case. People do not age in disciplinary boxes, and we need to share evidence, we need to share research across disciplines if we were genuinely to understand the aging process. As well as UK-funded initiatives, I think it's very important for us to acknowledge the significant role played by Europe in encouraging aging research across the European continent, the European Union, but also specifically in the UK, since the UK was one of the main beneficiaries of EU research programs over more than 2 decades. And many gerontologists, perhaps there are some in the room or viewing us online, will look nostalgically back to Key Action 6 under Framework Programme 5, which I think many acknowledge was the turning point when the European Union put an emphasis in a framework program on aging research, because the gerontologists across Europe cheered, but that really was the turning point. And then in the subsequent framework programs, Framework Program 6 and 7, aging played a really important role. And of course, it's important under the Horizon program, which we were excluded from, but hopefully not for much longer. So I think it's really important to acknowledge the significance of European research. Europe also bequeathed an essential focus on early career researchers, and this was an important part of all of the coordinating efforts that Europe underwent to encourage aging research, and the development of early career researchers was a really important part of that. And the future leaders of aging research in Europe, I had a role in, very proud of, and I'm also proud that UKRI adopted this approach to try to invest in and encourage future generations of aging researchers. Now, of course, you'll be thinking, there are multiple ways for us to interpret Judith's injunction, look at the milestones. And I've picked out the major funding initiatives, but of course, that's only one way of looking at the milestones of aging research. Another way is to identify the emergence of key research themes and the advances in gerontological research that they represent. And here is my own selection, and you can look at it critically, please, because I'm sure everyone in the room will have their own selection of what they see as the major themes in aging research and the major advances that they represent. Having said that, in Europe, we produced a decade ago something called the Aging Research Roadmap. And if you go online and look at that, and then you compare it with the United Nations Research Agenda on Aging, you will find a remarkable coincidence in the key research themes identified by the European Roadmap and the United Nations Roadmap. Of course, for the UN, there's a slightly different focus in terms of development, but in terms of the key research themes on aging, they're pretty much the same. So although you may have your own individual priorities, I'm sure that most of these would be consensus across the room, with maybe one or two dissensions or disagreements about precisely where they should fit in the aging research agenda. Now, turning from thinking about milestones, I'm inclined to think that a more accurate approach is to see aging research as a series of transformations. So there isn't a scientific revolution where we go in a series of step changes from one advance to another, but rather science is about incremental transformations that, looking back, represent significant changes, but perhaps piece by piece, they don't seem so significant. For example, in social gerontology, the switch over several decades from looking at individuals and the role of individuals in a functionalist scenario as rather creatures of broader transformations towards an understanding of the importance of social structure and the elements of social structure, I would pinpoint as a major transformation in aging research. Shifting from old age to aging brings in the life course and tells us that people age from the moment they're born or before that through to death, rather than isolating a particular period in the life course. And that opens the way for understanding how cumulative advantages and disadvantages occur over the life course. I think social gerontology in particular has become more active politically over the last couple of decades, engaged in more policy-oriented work around active aging, age-friendly cities, an emphasis on human rights. The emergence of environmental gerontology, I think, is important, where the person is put in their spatial and technological and physical environment. And from standardized life courses to diverse, differentiated life courses, bringing emphasis to extended working lives. And I'm not an expert in biogerontology, but I think in biogerontology, Janet will correct me, a transition from old age to senescence and frailty. Also, we see key transformations in methods and approaches, and I've just picked out a few, and important in my research and research activity has been the movement that you can observe in retrospect from treating older people as purely the subjects of research to regarding them more, not completely, I'm not arguing, more as active participants in our research on aging. And also in terms of research infrastructure, a switch from lone scholars to collective research identities, from, in UKRI terms, response mode to programs, and then back to response mode, and from UK-only funding to UK and EU funding, and then back. So that's my review of what I think of as milestones or transformations, and I just want to finally acknowledge why we should do aging research. And I think the late, great gerontologist Matilda White Riley put it very well. There's a gerontological imperative to make sure that scientific and professional advances will gradually create structural opportunities and supports for developing the full potential of older people's lives. Thank you very much. Now it's my pleasure to hand over to Christina.
Good morning. So I'm going to follow this wonderful presentation from Alan with more perhaps narrow view of what has been the development on aging and gerontology research in the past years. We did a project at Technopolis in collaboration with Science Metrics to mine the results from the REF outputs. So this is very much focused on the output side of things. It includes mostly academic papers and publications, 80% of the time, but it also includes other type of research outputs, including, for instance, exhibitions, performance, medical devices, artifacts, and IP. So it's a broad research outputs in its broad sense. And we covered different exercises. One of them was to try to understand the extent to which those outputs submitted across different units of assessment, so across different disciplines, were tackling aging and gerontology research. And that's what I'm going to show to you today. So some key results from this analysis. The first one is that aging and gerontology research crosses multiple disciplines and units of assessment. We identified that 12% of all the research outputs were around aging and gerontology research. That is quite high, I would say, 20% across all of them. Most of them were indeed, as you perhaps would expect, focused on the medical disciplines. So 76% of them were focused on panel A. However, that was not the end of the story. There was also many research outputs submitted in other areas. And I think connecting to what Alan was telling us just a minute ago, there is a big representation of that side of research on the units of assessment that covers the social sciences and the arts and humanities as well. In particular, there was a high representation in panel C and areas of research such as, for instance, sport and exercise sciences, leisure and tourism, social work and social policy, and also sociology were areas where submissions were done by different universities with focus on aging and gerontology research. So our first task was identify the how much, where there is the spread, where is the presence across the units of assessments. And then on the basis of that, we did some data linking then to try to understand a bit more about the characteristics of that research. So one of the key findings is that research in gerontology research stands out in terms of the quality of the research and the way that is qualified in the context of the REF exercise, with the majority of the outputs being qualified as being world-leading and or internationally recognized. So I have selected here, what you have in front of you are the two main panels where we can find this research. In panel 8, the average scoring for aging was 3.21. Well, for all the research that was submitted under panel 8, we found that the average was 3.19. Just as a reminder, the scores go from 1 to 4. So if we compare with the average for that panel for that type of research, actually aging in gerontology stands out an even higher quality in comparison with that benchmark. And we have, if we look at it from a more granular level, and we look at individual units of assessment, there are some areas where that research stands out even more. And I have that marked there in bold for you. So for instance, we have public health and health services and primary care coming out really strong as well in panel A, followed by the biological sciences and clinical medicine as well. So those being the bottom line spots of excellence within UK research. If we move towards panel C, we see, again, very high scores in terms of quality, on average at least much higher than the average for the rest of research, with, again, some pockets of excellence around economics and econometrics, architectural built environment and planning, and social work and social policy, and sports, exercise sciences, and leisure activities as well, as being, again, pockets of excellence within that panel. We also identified there were pockets of excellence and specialism across different regions. So we identified the location of the universities that made those submissions. We also located the amount of outputs that each of those universities across the different regions were submitting to REF, and the extent to which they have a higher in comparison with the total, say, average of submissions, if submissions around aging and gerontology were relatively high. And that's given then by a number higher than 1, means that there is a degree of specialism, because what's being submitted in this area of research is higher in comparison to their overall submission. So we did find that even though Northern Ireland does not represent, in terms of the number of universities that are represented, of course, a higher amount of volume or outputs, they have a high degree of specialism in aging and gerontology research. We find two other pockets of specialism in the UK, in London, perhaps not as a surprise, but also in the West Midlands. In all other cases, the relative submission of aging and gerontology research across the different regions is below 1. Another interesting aspect that we tried to explore was the degree of interdisciplinarity of aging and gerontology research, trying to connect as well, again, to what Alan was telling us just a minute ago. We explored that by using a couple of techniques that try, despite its limitations, to try to measure the degree of interdisciplinarity within research outputs. We look at it from 2 different perspectives. We look at the diversity of the references that are used in a research, so the extent to which researchers are mobilizing methodological frameworks or the conceptual frameworks that come from other disciplines. And we also look at the diversity of the authors, so if the authors themselves come from different disciplinary backgrounds. So we have that DDA being the representation of different authors from different disciplines, and the DDR, which captures that, as I said, mobilization of research frameworks, concepts that come from different disciplines. So I think what's interesting here, perhaps even before focusing on the REF outputs, is focusing on the UK as a whole. So when we look at the UK, or for instance, research funding by UKRI, we find that there is a high degree of this multidisciplinarity if we look at the diversity of authors. So 1 is the world average in general. Actually, so the world average for the kind of benchmark point is a benchmark point, sorry. The world average is 1.1. UK is 1.24, so high degree of disciplinarity, high multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, even higher if we look at outputs that have been funded by UKRI. Now, if we look at REF submissions, that goes even higher. That's very interesting as well. This is not a talk about REF, but it means that there has been an incentive, or incentive enough, for universities to make submissions of interdisciplinary research to REF. And we can see that when we focus on, in this case, these panels are giving you the statistics for aging and gerontology research, we do find that there is a high degree of submission. But as I say, I don't want to focus on the REF side of things too much, because that may be just a virtue of how REF works, and decisions are being made about submissions. But I think the bottom line here is that we do find that research that's been done in the UK in this area has a high degree of interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity measured by authors, a bit lower when we measure it by the ability of mobilizing conceptual frameworks from other disciplines, and still higher than the world average by 1.05 and 1.03 if we focus first on UKRI-funded research and then in the UK. And then finally, for me, another interesting insight that we were able to measure, to identify with this exercise, was the extent to which this output, this research that was being produced, was being uptake beyond academia. So we do that via citations, and you will probably have seen similar exercises before. When we focus on academia, we will look at citations of those research in other academic papers. What we're able to do here with our partners on Science Metrics is also to look at citations of this type of research, of aging in gerontology, on patents, on policy documents, and also on practice guidelines, and then on news items. Perhaps the news items are a bit more difficult to explain, but if we think about the uptake, say, on patents, then that would be a proxy for innovation. If we think about the uptake in policy-related documents and practice guidelines, that would be a proxy for that research being mobilized to be able to take some decisions or to inform the decisions of policymakers. And what we found then when we look at aging gerontology research for REF, but also we look at that UKRI and UK as well, to give us a broader perspective, we see that, and you will see that by the cells marked in green, that there is a very high uptake. A very high uptake, meaning a flow of knowledge that is transitioning from academic research all the way to what innovators are doing, all the way what policymakers are thinking about. REF is a bit higher than UKRI and UK. That's not a surprise, because a selection is being made as to what is submitted to REF. But again, in this case, I want us to focus on the fact that even when we focus on UK more widely, or research funded by UKRI, we do see a very high uptake, with one, again, being the world average, everything in excess, showing that it's happening to a higher degree. So this is a taster of the various things that we did with the report. There is more information in the report. I'm happy to expand a bit more on it, but my time is now over, so thank you very much, and thank you. And next, we have Carol.
Thank you, Christina. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so as Judith mentioned, I'm the president of the British Society of Gerontology, and we commissioned the University of Sheffield. So the people you can see listed there, Surinder Banga, Sarah Hargreaves, and Gail Mountain, to conduct an evaluation of the impact case studies. So as well as the outputs that Christina was just talking about, the universities submit cases where research has had impact. And we particularly wanted to look at the role of ageing research within the REF 2021 REF. So the aim was to really look at the content and the reach of ageing research within those impact case studies, and to what extent, how dominant are they in terms of the full range of impact case studies that were submitted. What is the proportion, for example? So we wanted to look at the range of units of assessment, and we also wanted to consider the role of social gerontology, particularly because British Society of Gerontology has a preponderance of social gerontologists within it. We wanted to look at how impact has been addressed with a specific subsample as well. So as well as looking at the overall data, we did some in-depth qualitative analysis with around 25 of the impact case studies. And we wanted to also consider how this analysis may be of value to members as they develop their own research and their own impact, but also others involved in research about ageing and later life. So what I've done there, I hope you can see that. The pie chart is just to tell you what is the kind of impact that people have claimed. So when you're producing an impact case study, you have to say what impact are you claiming for this, and they have to put a predominant impact they're claiming. They can also put other subsidiary ones. So we just looked at the predominant impact that people are claiming, and you can see there that health and societal impact were the biggest ones, and not a lot of difference between health and societal impact. And actually that difference has reduced a little since the analysis we did of REF 2014. You can also see that of the over 6,000 impact case studies there were, 572 of them were directly relevant to ageing research. And that's increased, not hugely, but it has increased since REF 2014. But what was also interesting to note was that ageing impact was in 33 out of the 34 units of assessment. So that's quite phenomenal, really. Ageing impact is coming out of research across a whole range of fields. The only one that it didn't come out of was earth sciences. But we were quite surprised at the full range of where research is having impact on the lives of older people. So what I've done on this slide, I hope you can read a little bit of it, is to just give some examples, put some flesh on the bones really, rather than just look at data. I've just picked out 4 impact case studies. So panel A, panel C in the order, a panel D and panel B in that order. So the first one is looking at falls prevention amongst older people and the impact that they claim. This was a University of Manchester study in panel A, was reduced burden of falls in the UK and worldwide. The next one was improving the lives of older people in Kenya from the University of Southampton. This was a panel C, where they looked at evaluating and also at impact on the development of an older person's cash transfer program and the impact on the decision, the Kenyan decision to roll out a universal non-means tested benefit to all over 70s, a pension, basically a state pension. The third one was panel D, which was looking at creative approaches to the active ageing agenda through film and theatre making, and that was from Leeds Beckett University, helping older people in UK and Romania to become more independent, confident, mentally agile and socially connected, and also raise broader awareness of older people's experiences. And then the last one I picked out was from panel B, which was looking at designing socially intelligent adaptive systems to inform commercial AI development and engage the public in debates over the human-robot interaction, and particularly claimed impact on new concepts for design and industry standards for personal care robots. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about impact case studies. But what I wanted to do was to also look at how are they having this impact? How do they go from doing the research to having the impact? And it's not just talking about researchers here. So firstly, if you look down the right, you'll see various themes repeated. So the research is collaborative. They might work with a company. So the first one particularly worked with technology companies, and the last one did as well. They worked with policymakers. So to inform policy, you need to work with policymakers. They provided support for people who are going to enact this say, falls prevention. They worked to support the implementation, the people who were actually going to support the implementation, maybe providing a toolkit, for example, or some training. They also provided data to demonstrate the benefits, because as well as demonstrating it to the REF, we need to demonstrate it to people who might fund this intervention, so return on investment analyses, for example. And then some of them were particularly timely, so related to COVID, for example, or other things. And there was active dissemination. What you can also see is some of them had funding to implement, increase the impact. So the IAA is impact acceleration accounts, which are provided by certain of the research councils, but also participatory, so involvement of older adults in the impact that was developing. Media dissemination was a big aspect, so not just dissemination to other researchers. So hopefully you can see some of the ways that people had impact there. So key points from the impact case study sample. So we wanted to see who's funding the research that produces impact. And there was a diverse range of funders, not just UKRI, but a whole range of different funders, maybe funding from different charities, for example. But actually, in the majority of cases, the impact case studies were based on a series of awards, not just one award. So that's perhaps important to note, and then not necessarily awards all from the same funder. And in some cases, as I say, there was specific funding to support impact acceleration. There was evidence of collaborative work in all of them, and that was up from REF 2014. There was international reach in the majority of them. There was a reasonable timescale between research and impact. In fact, it was reasonably quite rare for impact to be reported within a year or so. So you can see on a little figure there, up to 1 year was only actually one of the impact case studies we looked at in depth. But 9 to 12 years, 1 to 4 years. In fact, the mean was about 5 years. So it doesn't happen straight away, and it sometimes takes a bit of development to actually get from bench to bedside, as they say. Teams or individuals, and I think the key thing to point out here was no impact case studies were based on a single researcher. So they were all, the majority of them were based on the work of researchers and projects and teams which include those beyond the submitting institution. So they weren't just based on one university either. 2 of them were based on the work of one research team, but the majority were not. They were based on a much broader range of actors. And then finally, participation and engagement with older people had increased quite a lot since the previous REF. And this isn't just about having older people as research participants or subjects, as we used to call them. But what we're talking about is people being involved in user-centered design, in co-design of research, co-design of interventions, participatory performances, like in one of our samples that I gave you a moment ago, the creation of cultural artifacts, and also international collaborations, and also enabling the experiences of marginalised groups and intergenerational activities. So a bit of a shift there in terms of the participation and the role of older people within research about ageing, which is great. But actually, what probably the key point, if you don't remember all of the rest of it, is to note that it was active efforts. It wasn't just doing the research and talking about it and publishing the papers. It was active efforts on the part of the researchers and the teams to provide an indication of the commitment and the perseverance of the researchers for generating impact from research. So that was really clear in all the impact case studies we looked at in detail. So just in conclusion, so disciplinary involvement in ageing is shifting. There are, I think, as Alan was saying, other disciplines are joining perhaps the traditional preponderance of social sciences, but there's a greater engagement of social sciences in health-related research, enabling the impact using social science methods and skills. And that's been stimulated to some extent by the research funders funding multidisciplinary research. So although health remains the most commonly occurring category of impact, we saw at the beginning it was closely followed by societal. And the increase recognises the growing need for societal, not just health impact. So ageing well isn't just about intervening when people have health crises. So underpinning research is multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary, and the impact is underpinned by collaborations and partnership activities, including a wide range of stakeholders, as we said, older people themselves, but also organisations, agencies, third sector organisations, policy-making organisations, and this remains absolutely pivotal to be able to have impact with the research that we're doing. And then the richness and the variety illustrated in the case studies illustrates really how research can benefit the lives of older people and their families and carers. So the REF impact case studies are to be celebrated, and hopefully from just this very brief snapshot you can understand that and see that this is really important. And so we hope that the report that we've put together, which will be available hopefully by the end of the week on the BSG website, will initiate a further dialogue across disciplinary areas and with stakeholders, And the overview of ageing research across the case studies indicates that there are major challenges and opportunities presented by age and ageing in society, and that they will benefit from collaborations which bring together all these different perspectives. Thank you. So I'm now to introduce Janet to you.
Okay, so good morning, and as Alan said, ageing is a complex process, and if we really are going to deliver an older population that spends more time in good health, I think really all of the disciplines do need to work together. So I'm going to hopefully bring you up to speed. This is the task I've been given with where biological sciences are in trying to deliver improved health span. And this is this concept called geroscience. So what is geroscience? So you'll see on the diagram here, we haven't got a pointer, so I'm going to use the old pointer in my hand here to try and get it across to you. So here we have a list of age-related diseases. So diseases that the older you get, the more chance that you may come down with them. So we've got cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's. And currently how we treat these diseases and how we research them, we do them singly. So if you're interested in cancer, you do cancer research. Heart disease, you do heart disease research. And equally, the patient is then treated separately. So the disciplines, the medical disciplines are also siloed. So again, the cancer, you'll see an oncologist. But when we think about the older human being, actually, they rarely have one of these conditions. So they are said to be multimorbid. So if you're in the group of under 60 years, approximately 28% will have more than one condition of these age-related diseases. When we go to 60-74, then we're 47.6%. Almost half of that age group will be multimorbid. And when you get to over 65, 2/3 of that population will be experiencing more than one condition. So what geroscience says is the current medical model is broken. This can't be correct if we're getting to old age with all of these conditions and with the associated polypharmacy. So if all of these conditions are caused by aging, why don't we just tackle aging? And you'd think, I think even 10 years ago, that this suggestion you would be barking mad to even try to think about this. But things have really moved on in the last 10 years, and there's been a consensus in the biological world around the processes that are underlying the expression of the aged phenotype, and they're called the hallmarks of aging. There were originally 9 of them, but literally just a few months ago they were updated, so we now have 12 of them. And basically, there are 3 levels. You start off, if you see with the light blue there, with some form of damage. It could be damage to your proteins, your DNA. It can even, the new kid on the block is your microbiome. So your gut microbiota can change. So they're all forms of damage, a bit like rust on an old car. What happens then is the body responds. So that's the green area there. So you get things like the mitochondria, the energy-producing organelles in your cell become dysfunctional. You get a process called cellular senescence. So the cell, when it's damaged, has 2 choices, well, 3. It can try to repair itself. If the damage is too extreme, it dies completely. But if it's somewhere in between, it enters a state called cellular senescence. And this we now know is one of the key drivers of aging. So in the purple there, you've then got the consequences of this response to aging. And one of the key ones turns out to be a process called inflammation. So what can we do about this? Where is biology? So I'm going to take you through one example through cellular senescence to see where we're going. So to be a hallmark of aging, to be classed as a driver of aging, there are 3 criteria. It has to increase with age. If people have more of that particular process, then they age quicker, they die quicker. If they have less of it, they live longer, they live healthier. Those are the criteria. So for cellular senescence, this was actually discovered by a chap called Leonard Hayflick in 1961. And for years, we could just show that as you got older, you got more of these senescent cells. I could take a skin sample from you, and the older you were, the more of these cells you would have in the skin. But that was just associative data. It didn't mean it caused aging. Until 2011, when this wonderful piece of science came out. And what they did there is they took a mouse, and hopefully you don't need to be an expert in mouse biology to see that the one here on the bottom left there is an old mouse. It's got kyphosis, curvature of its spine, it's lost its muscle, the poor thing's got cataracts. What they did with these mice were they genetically engineered them so that they had no senescent cells. Every time a senescent cell appeared in the body, it got deleted. So this on the top there of these two mice, that's the one with no senescent cells. And again, I think you can see this is a pretty perky mouse. You know, no muscle loss, no cataracts. So these mice lived longer and they had less age-related disease. And that's wonderful. So that was, again, the first evidence that we had that senescence was a cause of aging. But clearly we can't genetically manipulate humans so that they delete all their senescent cells. So where's the field now? Well, here is where we are. 2019, so there are drugs that will kill senescent cells. These are drugs already in use clinically, so we don't have to develop a new drug. And this was the first clinical trial. It was in an age-related disease called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, quite an unpleasant condition of the lungs. And these lungs of an older person with IPF is full of these senescent cells, so that's why they picked this condition. And they treated the patients with these senolytic, these senescent cell-killing drugs, just for 3 days each week, because the drugs they were using are quite powerful chemotherapeutic agents. There are now nutritional components that do it. But essentially, after just 9 days of treatment, these patients who could barely walk beforehand could do a 6-meter walk test better, get out of a chair easily. These trials are ongoing now, so there are now 50 trials ongoing of these drugs. So this is not this is not science fiction. This is happening now. So this is where the field has moved to. But if we're really going to think about preventing aging, so this is treating age-related disease once it's there, but what about preventing aging? If you're going to do that, who do you give the drugs to? Do we all take them all of our lives? What happens? And what we're suggesting in the field is you need to know how old somebody is biologically, not chronologically. We can do that easy. We just look at the birth certificate. But biologically, how old are they? So we've now got tests to do this. This is just one of them. It's called an epigenetic clock. It's rather like cutting a tree in half and counting the rings. What you do is you take a person's blood sample or saliva, and you take the DNA, and you look how many methyl groups are on the DNA. So if you look at this bottom left figure here, this is the association between chronological age and how much methylation there is on your DNA. And can you see there's a really tight association? Hopefully you can see there are some people that have the grey dots are above the line and some are below. So basically the more methyl groups you have, the quicker you die. The less you have, the slower you die. So it's a biological aging clock. And we've now got interventions that can reverse this clock. This is a study in healthy older males, aged 51 to 65, just treated for a year with 3 components, and their age was reduced by 3 years in just a year. So this is where the field is now. These are powerful drugs. You'd never put anybody on that, I don't think, for any length of time, but there are now nutritional components that will do the same thing rather than these powerful drugs. So I'm going to finish now, because this is all about the state of UK ageing research and healthy ageing, with some of the points from this House of Lords report that I was fortunate enough to be scientific advisor to. And we actually made 22 recommendations. We started off with 50, but the Lordships, we whittled it down to 22. And we felt that there's this challenge that the government has set itself, and you'll all be aware of this, that by 2035, we achieve 5 extra healthy, independent years of life, and that we narrow the gap between the experience of the richest and the poorest, reduce health inequalities. And the report concluded that we were not on track to reach that target, nowhere near. And so we made a series of recommendations that we hoped might help to reach this. The first one was that there are really shockingly large differences in healthy life expectancy amongst ethnic groups, and we really have to tackle that. We recognised that there were exciting new developments in the biology of ageing, and that the government should prioritise funding such research. And the report was published in January 2021, and UKRI did actually act upon this. I was really pleased that within 6 months of its publication, funding was announced for UK Ageing Networks. So there are 10 of them, and some of them, and Carol leads one of them here. So they're not just biology, they are multidisciplinary. There's one called ATTAIN, which looks at health inequalities and inability to access programs to increase physical activity. So they really are broad, but I think most of them do have a strong biology in them. We wanted to really say that a priority for public health intervention must be to look at deprivation and those suffering the worst health. So again, if we bring any of those drugs online, what we need to be doing is targeting those on a negative health trajectory, perhaps to focus our efforts. And we said that yes, there are fantastic technological advances that will really help people to live longer independently. And I looked at the displays downstairs, and there are many examples there. But we have to be sure that these technologies are widely accessible, and that we don't actually increase health inequalities by making those technologies not accessible to a wide population. We said that one of the things we realised that there was actually nobody in charge of that grand challenge of getting 5 more years by 2035, no government body actually in charge of it. If you're not in charge, you've not got a roadmap, so they could get Alan along and get a roadmap for it, I think. But we said that really had to happen. Somebody had to take charge of it. It really hasn't happened yet. We recommended that, we needed to prioritise funding of health inequalities. And you're hearing from the Chief Medical Officer tomorrow. And we actually said that we thought he should be given responsibility for coordinating ageing research across UKRI and the NIHR. That hasn't happened, but I think his report makes it clear that he has taken healthy ageing on board. It really is a priority for him. And if you do read his report, you will see a lot of these themes coming out. So I'll end there and I'll hand over to Carol. Thank you. Oh no, sorry, Judith, not Carol. I bet that gave you a shock, Carol.
Thank you very much, Janet. I think that's a fantastic segue into me talking about the Healthy Ageing Challenge, which actually was part of the Grand Ageing Challenge. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Healthy Ageing Challenge Social, Behavioural and Design Research Programme, which was the research programme set up as part of that challenge. And this was created under Theresa May's jurisdiction, which feels like donkey's years ago. It's actually only about 5 years ago, under the industrial strategy. And the intention was to stimulate the ageing market, so bringing business into the ageing ecosystem. One of the things that the challenge wanted to do was to make sure that older people were at the heart of designing quality products, which traditionally they hadn't been. So really bringing older people to work with business, really from the forefront, and aligning healthy aging solutions with their needs and wants. So the vision of the Healthy Aging Challenge was to enable businesses, including social enterprises, led by research, to develop and deliver services and products that supported older people, to really allow them to remain independent, although I prefer to say interdependent, and socially connected. And one of the things I think that was very important in the Healthy Aging Challenge was it wasn't just research. There are a whole range of initiatives under the challenge, which had £98 million, ranging from trailblazers, which were engaging businesses ready to scale up to market, to catalysts, where we had researchers developing spin-outs and were mentored by Zinc. So a whole range of programs with the research as a wraparound and a supporting function, and also a community of practice where we could all share our ideas and thoughts from a whole set of thematic areas. And the research programme centred around 7 themes of the challenge, where it was felt that research or an investment could make a difference in delivering that vision. And here are the 7 challenge themes. And they produced a very holistic picture, I think, of what made for a healthier later life. And we've seen these rather as challenges, more as opportunities where we can make a difference, and more importantly, make a difference to social transformation, not just health, and opportunities for business to get engaged and to make a difference in the lives of older people. And I think for the very first time, one of the distinctive things was bringing business into the research arena. It had been quite piecemeal before, but this programme, I think, following on from Alan's commentary, was really distinctive. And looking back at all the programmes, there's always been something that's been distinctive. I think Alan, in the New Dynamics of Ageing, really made sure that co-production with older people, that interdisciplinarity was really there and really spearheaded that emphasis. And I think for our programme, working with business was quite revolutionary in some ways. We've learned a lot. And so the Social and Behavioural and Design Research Programme, part of the challenge, focused specifically on research and had several different themes. I'm not going to go through all of these. These are all available on our website, which you'll see at the end. But age-friendly housing was one really key area where we could work alongside businesses in the Trailblazers and other initiatives that had been funded. And you'll hear a little more from the Desha project in a moment. We had projects focusing on the outdoor environment, particularly looking at extending active life for people with cognitive impairment through innovations in the visitor economy or tourism and in the natural environment, and some really interesting initiatives going on throughout the UK on that. And also looking at environmental determinants of health. So one team, which you'll hear about in a moment, looking at air pollution and the effect of that on healthy ageing. A major theme was also on work, so maintaining health at work and looking at hidden health in the workplace, things like menopause and how that was affecting people's healthy lifestyle. And looking at workforce retention in the social care environment. Supporting social connections through digital inclusion, the GOLD project, was really looking at digitally connecting people, for example, through sports reminiscence and working with football teams and businesses in relation to that. And supporting healthy ageing, reducing inequalities through co-produced cultural activities, engaging marginalised groups, disabled groups in cultural activity. We also felt that there were some gaps in that framework, so we commissioned another set of projects, and we focused very much on particular environments. I was keen to look at the retail environment. There's very little research on what's happening in retail and hospitality. And so we had another series of projects, one raising awareness and developing pathways to impact, working with retailers and retail organisations to deliver impact, not research, but deliver all the research and look at impact. And there's a stand at the back there illustrating some of that work. Climate change. We felt there was a huge gap here. We needed to look at sustainability, climate change, and we have a number of projects looking at that, looking at co-designing inclusive climate change reaction in age-friendly cities. And these projects, of course, are spread across the UK. In terms of the distinctiveness of the programme, I've talked about bringing business on board as a distinctive element. But there are 5 things, I think, where we would like to highlight that distinctiveness, real cross-cutting themes for all the projects. They all co-produced their research co-design their research with older people themselves, but also with business. And I think this tripartite co-production is quite a distinctive feature. Not easy, of course, but all the projects have been doing this, and we've had several really interesting workshops. We wanted this to be meaningful engagement with older people, meaningful engagement with business, not a tokenistic, just an advisory board, but really working together throughout the process of research. Interdisciplinarity, we've heard a lot about that this morning, but wanting to put social science at the heart because it really contributes to everything in relation to aging, geroscience included, and bringing design and arts and humanities as well as social science to the fore. One of the things I'm particularly pleased that we've been able to do, and building on all the hard work that Alan has done in building capacity for the next generation of leaders in gerontology and social gerontology in particular. And given that we started the challenge during COVID, what we've tried to do is really develop those network opportunities for our early career researchers, taking them out on international trips, engaging them in mentorship, and leadership courses. And they themselves have formed a wonderful group together, peer support group, that's hopefully now linking with the British Society of Gerontology Early Researchers in Aging, so that we have a legacy when the programme finishes next March, that there will be ongoing support for our early career researchers. Of course, they need funding research, so funders in the audience, think hard about this. We need to keep these programmes going. And also policy impact. A lot of the emphasis, of course, has been on England, and I'm very keen that we really work in the devolved nations. We've got projects, in fact, half of our projects are in the devolved nations, and really looking at those policy differences and how do we really get under the skin of our policymakers in those devolved nations. We want to amplify the messages from the programmes as a team, but also promoting a programmatic approach as well to achieve the vision of the challenge and to really get funders across the UK to think about the next programme. So the best thing to do is to give you a snapshot of some of these projects. So I'm going to end on an introduction to 3 projects, and I'll leave you with our video.
As we age, we want to stay in our own homes, but our own homes can become alienating, confusing, difficult environments, particularly if we're experiencing cognitive change or dementia.
The problem's going to be that as you get to 55, 65, 75, 85, you're going to have an increasing number of health conditions, and that's going to get increasingly complex. So having a house that works for you really means thinking strategically about that.
Deshka, Designing Homes for Healthy Cognitive Aging, is a research project which aims to improve the design of homes so that they can support people to be healthy and to live their best life.
It's really critical to be doing this research now because we need to get in at the right stage with policymakers, decision makers, developers, planners, and all of these people have been involved in this research.
We've had a massive number of research activities. We've collected data from lots of different people in lots of different ways. And what's really important is how we now communicate that.
The big innovation that we're looking at is developing a designed home that can be an exemplar of good supportive design.
We've also converted that evidence into real items that we can use day to day. Organisations and communities can use our serious game, for example, a board game to help professionals or service users facilitate and think about the ageing process into the future, working out what adaptations should we prioritise, how do we think through the accessibility of different individual rooms in the home. The other item that's really tangible is the virtual reality work that we've been doing in the project. So people can put on, the eyeglasses, and they can see what does a really good designed home look like that supports healthy aging. There are many things, endless things we can actually do to the home to adjust it, from the very small to having a certain plug at a certain place, to the very large to enlarging your door frames, etc.
The co-design is so important on a project like this because the lived experience actually informs teaching, it informs research, it informs the project.
So the funding from the UKRI Healthy Ageing Challenge has been really integral to getting to the DESHCA project up and running, not just in terms of funding it, but funding it at this scale.
We've not only provided a vast array of evidence, from kind of wider patterns of statistics to real stories, real narratives, real understanding of how people use their homes.
The Healthy Ageing Challenge is critically important because the chance to live independently actually keeps you out of the NHS.
If you're involved in housing policy, housing design, or building, please contact us to learn more about design for healthy cognitive aging.
The SPACE project, so that stands for Supportive Environments for Physical and Social Activity, Healthy Ageing and Cognitive Health. And it's really all about how where we live and how we live can promote better brain health. So one of the particular innovations of this project is taking what we call a systems science lens to it. So that is looking not just at one particular factor, such as air quality, but a number of different factors and what those interactions are.
We have two devices here which we set up for the participants. The first one being a GPS tracker and the second one being what we call an accelerometer. We can use those two sets of data, we can almost merge them together to find out whether people are doing physical activity in a green space or an urban space. And then we can then use the data we have from the cognitive assessments to try and find links between the two.
So essentially my team's role in the SPACE project is to explore how those environmental stressors really get under the skin. We're particularly interested in looking at epigenetics, so really teasing out the explanation between what people inherit from their parents and what the environmental stressors are.
I'm responsible for Work Package 2, which is really linking environmental data to the NICLA longitudinal data set.
It's really important to have the lived experience there, and I think that's one of the key parts of the research. The Queen's are very keen to have the voice of all stakeholders, but particularly older people, so that we can align what the evidence is saying to the experience of people here in Belfast.
We aim to have academic publications, of course, but ultimately it's much better to be able to impact upon policy. So if we can show impact from our research that interacting well with your environment promotes brain and cognitive health, then we would hope to be able to implement that in policy.
All good research is based on what has come before, what are the needs, what are the gaps, and it was those gaps and opportunities that allowed us to really develop the SPACE project.
The population is ageing, but it's more important to add quality to extra years rather than to have sickness in the last years of your life.
Really critical to have money available for this sort of research because it's what's providing the evidence base for future urban planning.
This project wouldn't have been possible without the funding from the UKRI Healthy Ageing Challenge. It's really been fundamental to allow us to put together this ambitious 3-year programme of work.
We're really interested in increasing participation in arts and cultural activities in order to increase social connectivity for older people, and particularly older people who are disabled socioeconomically and racially minoritized in society. And we're working with them throughout the project to co-design innovative products, services, performances alongside creative industries, creative technologists, artists and others. So the older people themselves are at the centre of that design process, and I think that's the innovation, and that's the thing that we want to find out more about and hopefully offer some guidance to other people. We think that we will have national and hopefully international impacts as well from this project, because everyone is looking for alternative ways of doing digital innovation for older people, because it is obvious that what's happening at the moment is not really working.
Today we were running a session that we called Mapping Connections. So we've done a lot of work on this project with participants, talking to them about how they define culture and cultural participation really broadly. Can we design or organise cultural experiences, whether that's digital or in person, to bring people together and foster nourishing senses of togetherness?
There is a very strong danger as you get older that you become more reclusive. You only really want to deal with the familiar, and anything that helps older people re-engage in whatever way, I think it improves your health, both mentally and physically, that you're engaged in some sort of creative activity.
Technologies often are designed by young white men in labs who really don't know anything about older people, and they certainly know very little about older people who don't fit into mainstream representations. So the people we're working with are disabled, socioeconomically and racially minoritized. Those are not the kind of people that are usually involved in design processes. It's a research project, and in order to be able to do a 3-year research project of this scale, we need substantial funding. And so the UKRI Social Behavioural Design project funding has just enabled us to do the project and to do it really well and very ethically as well, because the funding has allowed us to provide the kind of support we need for the co-researchers and for other partner organisations to get involved.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. We've now got a few moments so we can have some questions. If you can put the questions into the Slido, then I will pick them up here and I can field them to our respondents on the panel. While you're doing that and thinking of your questions to the panel, very quick questions, of course, we haven't got that much time. You can hold them back for this afternoon as well, of course. Just to summarise, I think what you've heard this morning is very much about the importance of funding programmes and sustained programmes in the UK. And I think going back to the 1980s, it's been a long road, but how wonderful for the UKRI to be able to demonstrate such investment in ageing research across the piece, and certainly stimulating interdisciplinary research, and we need to continue that. We've also heard about the high quality of research, particularly in the Research Excellence Framework, which is every 7 or 8 years where all universities are assessed. And if you look at that thematic area of ageing, it's above average quality and range. And also the impact in all different ways. So I think we can celebrate that across all ageing research and all the research councils. And then the cutting edge geroscience, which is really amazing, and how we should be all working together to look at how we take that forward ethically, and how social science is really, again, at the heart of some of that work. But what of the future? Where are we going? This afternoon, you'll hear from some of our panelists again, and extra panelists. So we have Professor Chris Phillipson from the University of Manchester joining us, and Dr. Emily Henderson, who's president of the British Geriatric Society, joining the panel, together with Professor Alison Park, the Deputy Executive Chair of the ESRC, who will be chairing the session this afternoon. And you'll be hearing, again, some answers to your questions on where we are going in the future. So I'm going to switch on my Slido. I keep calling it Sligo. I don't know why I'm doing that. But anyway, I haven't got any questions. Oh, I have got questions. They've just come up. Okay. I guess this is to Janet. In a scenario where a senolytic pill can prevent aging and reduce CS, what would be the main causes of mortality? And what are the limits of life expectancy? Gosh, that's a question. That's from Andrew Kingston. Andrew, come on.
Yeah.
Janet.
Yeah. Great question. I often say to our anatomists, you know, when we get somebody in who's a centenarian, what have they actually died of? And often you can't pin it down. So it's a really interesting question. If you slow the aging process, so in all of those, and we don't know in humans yet, of course, we've never got that far. It's one problem with humans, we're so long-lived that even UKRI is never going to invest in a study that says, we give you a pill now when you're 20 and what are you going to be like in 70 years' time? It's not going to happen. But in the animal model systems, they live a little bit longer, not massively longer, interestingly enough. But the main thing is that their health span is increased, so less disease, or it takes longer for the disease to develop. And so what you would die of, it would really vary, to be honest, and that might be where your genetics would come in. So you might be from a family that perhaps is a little disposed to cancers, and it might be cancer. So I think it will vary. It won't be just one thing that a person does eventually pass away from. The limits, well, again, epidemiology tells us the oldest lived human being was Jeanne-Louise Calment, who lived to be 122 years old. She's the only human being lived to longer than 120. So in most populations, 115, 117 is how long people live for. So it seems to me that there is an upper limit. So even with senolytic drugs, we are not going to be living to 200 years old, despite some people saying we can. I don't think there's no evidence. Eventually something will fail. Even the rusty car will no matter how much you get rid of the rust, will eventually go.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Janet. There's loads of questions coming in, actually. Oh, yeah, hang on a minute. I'm just going to ask one more question, and then I'll allow you in. How successful do you think the networks of age-related research has been? Alan, perhaps you could kick off with that, and then Carol and Janet.
I think. No, after you.
Yeah, so the networks, the interdisciplinary networks have been running just about 18 months, getting on for 2 years come February, and I think some of us have just heard that there will be an extension of those. And I think we're just beginning to see some of the impact. So the networks themselves, the funding is to produce a network. It's not necessarily to do the research, but what we're beginning to see is research coming out of those. So examples might be funding for fellows that we've got at Lancaster, for example. Other networks have got funding for other researchers coming out of the back of those. One of the other things that we've really noticed is that our early career researchers who've been involved have really found it as a real step along in their careers as well. So it really enabling them to take the next step. So that's a real success for the interdisciplinary networks. I think probably the hardest thing has been the interdisciplinary aspects of it. How do social scientists talk to the biologists and the chemists and that kind of thing? And I think that is something that is really challenging, but also really inspiring. And I think we've all learned some new vocabulary on both sides, and I think that's been really, really useful. So we can start looking at, how do, for example, biological markers, how are they affected by the pollution in the atmosphere? How are they affected by the stress of unemployment? And these kind of things, and start bringing together some of these aspects. So I think they are the way to go. At the moment, the funding is to develop the networks, and it's watch this space. What are the next steps? But they're beginning to emerge.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think a lot of the networks were challenged to come up with a roadmap and what the research gaps were. So they've all been producing those, and that's something very positive, and I think will help UKRI perhaps position their funding in the future. But a lot of them have focused on the next generation, the early career researchers. So I'm involved in 2 of them, one called Carina, which is all about your immune system, and one called My Age, which is all about muscle. And you know, we've really focused the funding on giving a little bit of pump priming to early career researchers, getting that first little grant, which, you know, then gets you onto something bigger. So I think that's something that all of the networks have realised, and it's just a feature of all of them, I think, that we must support the next generation. So, and I think that's been a success. And I think the next stage is to get the networks speaking to each other. And we've started to do that. So otherwise we'll stay in our silos again. So I think with this extra years of funding that we literally just heard about on Friday, I think the next stage will be to get the networks to speak to each other and identify where they can work together to make a difference.
And I'm sure we'll pick that up later as well. Alan, do you want to
Yes,
say anything?
I'm really pleased to hear the positive feedback about the networks, because I'm not part of them and I really don't know how they're going. But what Janet and Carol have said, I think, is incredibly positive and hopeful. I think Judith is picking on me because there is a parallel initiative called UK AgeNet, which we're launching next week, which is an effort to bring together all of the research centres on ageing across the UK. I mean, any research centre, any major collaboration on ageing is an open door policy, can be part of that. And I think for me, there's no doubt about the enthusiasm for the research centres to be part of some broader whole that can speak with one voice, particularly to research funders, but also to policymakers. But I think for me, the next step is then to say, what's the relationship between this broad umbrella, UK AgeNet, and the specific research networks? And as it happens, I'm talking to Lynn Cox about that later this week. So I think we're trying to find a way of ensuring that they are as integrated as possible.
Great, thank you.